Welcome to Five Star Conversations, where we talk with hoteliers making a positive impact on the hospitality industry. And today I have the pleasure of talking to Wayne Williams. Welcome, Wayne.
Thanks, Brendan.
Wayne, what we'll do is we'll start off with your bio so we can sort of get to know you. Then we will get into some questions. So, Wayne Williams is the Chief Financial Officer for the Minor Hotel Group, the hotel division of the Thai listed company Minor International. He has more than 20 years of experience working in Thailand and has been with Minor International for more than 18 years. In that time, the hotel group has grown from having 10 hotels to now having 564 hotels in 58 countries, actually more than 58 countries, with a turnover in excess of US 5 billion last year. Prior to joining Minor, Wayne held a number of senior finance roles in hotels and hospitality businesses in Thailand, Australia, and the Pacific. Wayne was previously president of the Australian Thai Chamber of Commerce in Thailand and was a member of the Thailand Board of Trade. He's currently the vice president of the Advance Australia Council of Thailand and is a board member of Hands Across the Water Charity Foundation, and we'll talk about that. As an AmsCham President Award winner in 2024, he was not only voted by his peers in 2023 as the top 10 global CFOs in the annual Icon Awards in the US, but his hotel team won the Global Finance Team of the Year in 2024 as well. A commerce graduate from the University of Queensland, he's been an Australian CPA certified for over 20 years. So welcome again, Wayne.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks for the invitation.
Wayne, I wanted to pick up on two things. The first one, the substantial growth in Minor hotels from 10 hotels when you started to 564. And as we said, going primarily from hotels in Thailand to now in 58 countries. That must have been, how would you put it? Like such
Tested
a
you,
logistic,
tested your
yes.
nerves, tested your nerves sometimes.
100%.
Um, yeah, when I joined, we had 10 hotels. They were all in Thailand. They were all owned hotels. Some of them were not run by us; they were run by other brands. And so the company from the hotel group was very Thai centric. A lot of Thai methodology in the way we operated. And I remember when we first moved into the Maldives and moved into Bali, where we were managing hotels, it was a complete change in terms of how the company thought about the way in which they ran businesses. And I think not purely by the fact you're in a different country, but you're dealing with different language, different culture,
Mm.
different behaviors. And so there was a huge learning curve at the start. And I guess it became quite natural thereafter in terms of as we went into a new market that we found ways to be able to adapt very, very quickly. So from inside, it's sounded quite normal. It's just kind of grown around us. But the reality is, from outside looking in, it seems like tremendous growth over a short period of time.
Well, it is tremendous growth over a short period of time. There's no doubt about it. And across so many countries, yeah, it's very impressive. And I don't think a lot of people know, obviously, here in Australia, the Oaks brand is probably the most well known. But Miners also owns businesses like Coffee Club,
That's
um,
correct.
yeah, and a
Yeah.
number of other concessions at airports, etc. as well. So people, I don't think people understand the depth of Miner as an organisation.
Yeah, look, that's true, and we're doing a lot to try and change that perception over the next couple of years. But when it comes to Australia, we've invested probably close to $1 billion there so far
Mm.
through the acquisition of Oaks back in 2010, and around about the same time we took a majority share of the Coffee Club, and we've expanded that since. Certainly, the hotels we initially bought 34 hotels. It was actually a public listed company in Australia, and then we ultimately bought enough to be able to delist it. We now have 71 properties, so
Wow,
not
okay.
insignificant. And then the other thing people don't know is we have the largest coffee roasting facility in Australia, in Melbourne. And so if you go into Aldi now and you buy coffee there, it's probably our coffee. So
There you go. I certainly didn't
yeah,
know that. Well, there, the things we learn. The other thing, obviously, in your bio is your relationship with Hands Across the Water. Originally, I suppose, as background, and I've been involved with Hands myself since 2012. So Peter Baines, the founder, is an Australian ex-federal policeman who did, I think, 3 tours after the Boxing Day tsunami doing body identification when he was with the Australian Federal Police, and then set up Hands Across the Water, an amazing charity, which now runs 7 properties, 7 homes.
Yes, we support 7 homes.
Yeah.
Some of them directly, some of them indirectly. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a passion project of mine for a while as well. I
Mm.
first met Pete around about 2016, 17, and they were trying to permeate the market here a little bit more, and I just happened to see him on a social feed, and the fact that everything that was raised was being distributed to the kids is something that piqued my interest, and so I reached out to Peter, and I've been working with Peter ever since. But yeah, I lived here during the Boxing Day tsunami. I was living in Bangkok at the time, but yeah, I certainly had friends that were deeply affected by what happened in the tsunami. And look, for me, it was just one of those things. We have a hard life as an expat, but we're in positions where we do build up networks, and I felt that it was an opportunity to give something back. Thailand's, pretty much my home and has been for over 20 years now, but you feel like you want to do something to give something back. And I've been privileged enough to be able to work with Peter and the founding board for a period of time. We created the foundation here, created a
Mm.
board. So I joined the board here. So I'm very pleased and privileged to have been able to participate for the last couple of years in whatever capacity I can.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Such a fantastic organization. And I think definitely the contribution to Thailand is the largest of any Australian charity, I believe, something along those
Uh,
lines.
by a long way, apparently.
Yeah.
So we've raised over $30 million in what is,
Mm.
again, a relatively short period of time. But you can imagine the impact that it's had on kids' lives to be able to give them choices, to be able to do things that they would otherwise not have the opportunity to do. And
Yep.
that's the reason why so many people are engaged with Peter's cause. Yeah.
Yep. And, I've having been to Banthay Namchai and a couple of the other homes a number of times. I remember the first time we did the ride in 2014. In good faith, Peter had actually committed funds to building a home for the children in Yosaton, and we got to see where our money went directly. And I don't think there's any other charity where you can touch and feel, see the contribution that your efforts are making. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not about pulling your heartstrings. It's about you getting a direct touch and feel for what goes on
Mm.
in those kids' lives and the
Yep.
impact that you can make. And that's where it really, really touches you.
Yeah. That's amazing. So let's talk about hotels. The first question I always like to ask is, how did you get into hotels? Is it something that you sort of thought about it, or is it something that you found your way into?
Me, I fell into it. I remember when I was going to high school, and my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I promised my dad that, look, when I finish high school, I will do my university degree by correspondence. And I was reasonably adept at accounting in high school, and it was one of the very few things that you could do by correspondence back in the early 80s. But I'll take the first job that I get. So I graduated, applied for a whole bunch of jobs, and I just happened to get a job as a mail boy at what was Coopers and Lybrand, the old infancy of PwC. And I just happened to be called onto the Hamilton Island account, and I was hooked from day one. It just kind of morphed from there. And I would think, with the exception of a couple of years of doing something that it was an adjacent kind of business, I've been doing it ever since. I think it just gets in your blood.
Yep, yep. And is there like an incident or memorable experience from those early days that sort of cemented that love or passion for hotels?
Yeah, when I look back, yeah, absolutely. One of the partners of the firm, he left in semi-retirement, and he was a board member of what was the infancy of Sanctuary Cove on the Gold
Okay.
Coast, the first integrated resort. And so
Yep.
he called me along to be an accountant there. So, yeah, for me, that was working on something with an entrepreneur, building something that was completely unique. Everything we touched was very new to being done in Australia. And it just harnessed my love for doing things like that. Yeah. And in that case, we weren't actually running the hotel. Hyatt was contracted to run the hotel. But to get involved in an integrated resort and be involved with every single aspect of that was something that fueled my passion a little bit for working in this industry. So, subsequent to that, I went sideways a lot, just looking at different experiences, when they became available, and you just build up your network over time. So, yeah, really enjoyed it. And, I don't think I'd be doing anything else.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, Century Cove. When you think back, yes, there's a lot of, yeah, in such a short period of time, I suppose a lot of history has been created. And I can think back to, when there were really no international hotels of significance in the Australian market.
No, no.
The last
Yeah,
35 years or so that we've seen.
yeah, look, I mean, clearly, there were some of the landmark brands, some of the very historical brands, like, properties in Sydney, but in particular, if you think about the Hilton and so on.
True.
But outside of that, in terms of the leisure market in Australia, not really. Yes, there were city hotels catering predominantly for the corporate market, but not a truly integrated resort with a country club and a golf course and a
Yeah.
shopping village, and it was really the first of its kind. It was modeled on North American integrated resorts, and so it was a little piece of history.
Talking about that, inspiration, is there a particular person or people over your career that you've got inspiration from?
Personally, I've been self-driven. Other than my dad, God bless him, he passed a long time ago, but he was somebody from a very humble background. Left school when he was 13 and just worked all his life. He was just a farmer. I lived on a farm till I was 13, and just the impact that you can make on people's lives, it was something that
Mm.
stuck with me forever. I'm pretty much an introvert, and he was a bit more of an extrovert. But I think it's when you've got a love for a business. I think and this type of business in particular, you need to be self-motivated, particularly when you move so much, you domicile away from family and in other parts of the world. I think there's a lot of people in this industry that are self-driven. There are people within the industry that you engage with over time as you're building your career, and they have an influence on what you do. But yeah, pretty much self-driven.
Okay. Nice. I think our parents obviously are always an inspiration as well from the, and they set some basics, some basic rules that I think as you grow old, I find anyway that you start to recall some of the stuff that your parents told you that you probably hope you'd never take on board.
Yeah, yeah,
You find you
absolutely.
telling your kids the same stuff.
Yeah,
Something, God, where
yeah.
did my dad's voice come from?
Particularly when you have kids. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And your parents said to you, you'll be saying this one day. It's like, no, definitely not. But you are.
But you do. Yeah.
You do, 100%. On that note, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received during your career, and who was that from?
It was probably my first expat role. It was in actually Vanuatu of all places, so not far from Australia.
Hmm.
And my GM at the time, when he was interviewing me, he said, "Look, Wayne, you have to realize working in hospitality, particularly hotels, is a lifestyle. It's not a job. And you'd better get used to it pretty early on, or else don't do it." And that's stuck with me ever since. And I've certainly had people in my career have said, "Oh, you got a wonderful lifestyle, Wayne. You go to all of these luxurious places and it's fantastic. You must love it." Yes, I love it. And they try and join. And then the first month end, you're doing a stock take on a Saturday night. And then all of a sudden, oh, hang on, I've got other things on it. So maybe this isn't for you. And so, yes, it is a lifestyle. It is genuinely a lifestyle. And I think most of the people that you probably interview on your program and others that you talk to know full well that it's not a job. It's something that you live.
Yeah, that is good advice. And the other thing that I suppose has come out of interviewing most of my guests that a lot, yeah, lifestyle, but it's also it can be a career. Unfortunately, there's a perception these days that you get a job in hospitality potentially whilst you're doing a uni degree or something, in a restaurant or in a hotel, and it's a paycheck whilst you're going to uni.
Yes.
But
Yes.
more and more, the guests that I've had on the program have proven hands down that, it's a lifelong career. There's substantial opportunities to grow and to travel widely.
Yeah. When I first got into hotels, when I first moved from the accounting firm, my dad's first question to me was, "What are you going to do as a real job?" Working in hotels as a second job in the mid '80s, that's what it was perceived as.
Yeah.
And for me, I was doing my my commerce degree by correspondence. And even people today, I'm interviewing people that don't quite understand that that's what you do. It took me 8 years to do a commerce degree, and then 5 years to do my CPA, 13 years of studying whilst you're working at the same time. These things are not considered these days.
Yep.
People can't perceive that. But the reality is it wasn't considered a career back in my day, and as I said, I fell into it. But the reality was, I picked up pretty quick that it was a career. I was lucky, as a finance person, there was a few around, but to consider it as a career in hospitality as a finance leader was pretty foreign.
Yeah.
In Europe, absolutely, there are people that went through. There in Northern America, there were people that, as soon as they left college, they were on a career path in terms of where it is that they wanted to go. So, I certainly found that, I ended up doing a lot of different types of things until you find your pathway into what it is that you really enjoy. And plenty of times you're asked to, oh, Wayne, would you like to train to be a hotel manager or a general manager? Because you've got so many strings to your bow. You're really looking at every aspect. And no, at the end of the day, the finance part is what comes to heart to me.
Yeah. Wayne, talk a little bit about obviously the industry now and what's happening. Is there an emerging trend in the industry that sort of excites you or potentially makes you nervous?
I think I'm always excited, as much as my job suggests that sometimes you have to say no more often than you say yes. At the end of the day, people will always travel. They'll always travel for leisure, or they'll always travel for business. So, the industry will just evolve over time. And you've seen there's plenty of disruptors that have happened over the last even 10 years with things like Airbnb and the prevalence of OTAs. There'll always be entrants to the market. But what we found is there is a place for all of those. And so it will continue to evolve. Some people were scared when things like Airbnb and OTAs were growing. But the reality is, I think there'll always be a need to be able to satisfy customers in whatever respect. I'm assured that in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll think curation. For me, curation will become more part of the landscape than cookie cutter. People are going to look for immersive experiences. They're definitely going to be looking at, voice activation and multilingual and, multi-sensory interactions. And a lot of those are going to continue to involve people. Yes, there's going to be a tech part to that. We'll probably talk about that later. But that interaction between guests and staff is always going to exist. Yeah. Am I nervous? Yeah. Look, there are some clear things in the industry like cyber risks that we need to be conscious of. But there are going to be things like, misinformation and disinformation and the way in which AI tools can create things. So the authenticity of what you see is always going to be increasingly questioned. You don't know whether what you look at is real or not. And so people are going to have to navigate through whether the experience is a natural experience. I think the other thing for me to be wary of is maybe the high dependency on tech for our industry and the concentration of players. You see it in the social media space where all of a sudden it's highly concentrated and we just need to be wary of that. I'm not saying I'm nervous about it, but we just need to navigate through it like we've had to navigate through other things in the last 10 years.
Yeah, some really good points, particularly regarding, as you said, artificial intelligence and, we were talking before about editing and being able to use, other people's voices. A colleague was telling me the other day that, I won't disclose, but they are a consultancy organization. They have offices around the world. The managing partner sort of requested I think it was a Teams call with this person. They were on the Teams call. It wasn't going quite right. And then they switched to WhatsApp or something, I believe. But it turned out that it was completely an AI generated avatar of this managing partner. And somebody was, obviously typing what was meant to be said and it was being, voiced. And then this managing partner was, asking these sub organization, how much money they had in the bank and, because they were looking to do something as a project. It's quite interesting. That's the first time I've heard of that, but I'm sure it's going to become a lot more common.
Yes, yeah. So, this whole misinformation and disinformation is something our organization is actively looking at in regards to right up to our risk committee as to, what it is that you need to be wary of and how you manage it. In a lot of cases, it's completely outside of your control, but you need to be very wary about it. And certainly you will have competitors who are going to look at those sorts of things as well, whether there's an opportunity to promote their business over yours. So, but
Mm.
I think people are becoming more attuned to it. Look, at the end of the day, we get asked a lot, what we're doing to use AI to improve our business. But this is a service business. So at the end of the day, I think attention over automation is always going to be top of the tree.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. Attention over automation. It's true. There are certain aspects where technology and automation can certainly help, but it's really to ensure that the guest facing aspect of our industry becomes more prevalent, if anything. So it's those boring, mundane, and probably you talked about personalization. That's a big thing that we hope we'll see come out of AI. But then obviously in the finance area, some of the reconciliations that are being done, if automation can help in that respect, then I think that's, it's allowing the team to add more value.
Yeah, and look, there's always going to be this no touch connectivity that customers are going to want to have as part of their experience or part of
Yeah.
their stay, whether it's a leisure visit or whether it's a business visit. And that could be anything from room keys to, bracelets or palm or face scanning. And as all those technologies
Yeah.
evolve, I'm not sure about self-service. I think there's always all this talk about, robots delivering room service to your room. I genuinely think at the end of the day, people are going, particularly on a leisure visit, they're going to experience something. And there are going to be times when they want it to be non-touched, but there's going to be absolutely times where they do want that interaction just to be enveloped in that experience.
It's interesting you mentioned robots delivering in room service, for example, because I've heard two schools of thought on that. And one of them is that obviously families with kids, the kids pester the parents to have the robot deliver something. So there's a
Yes.
increase in room service orders. The other one people have said is they're happy for the robot to deliver food, and they'll answer the door in their robe or underwear. But if it was a human, they wouldn't do that. So, or if they've ordered something, from an amenity from downstairs that the robot delivers, and they're less conscious that it's a
Yeah.
staff member. So, but you're right. I think at the end of the day, it's all about experience, and the
Mm.
robot is just an example of one experience that you could have.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is you're probably going to see the luxury segment is probably going to be less in tune to those sorts of services
Yeah.
because at their price points as well, they're actually selling the experience, and a lot of that has to do with that interaction. I can see at the lower level where price points are lower and margins are lower that you're going to be looking at options to
Mm.
to to make your business more efficient, and like you say, it becomes more transactional than otherwise. And
Yeah.
yeah, look, there's going to be a space for that as well, and there are going to be customers that are looking for that. So, like I think, as I said earlier, there is space for everybody in this market. People continue to travel. I mean, the expectations on spend on tourism continues to grow. If you look at all of the recognized agencies that are in this space,
Which is a wonderful thing for our industry.
yeah, that's the exciting part.
That is the exciting part. Around technology itself, I mean, what is one of the biggest learnings over the years when it comes to technology and its implementation, I suppose?
Look, probably a couple of things, Brendan. I mean, I think the first thing is, when guests experience a hotel, be it either for business or leisure, they genuinely expect that they receive better than what they get at home and or in the office. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether it's TVs or tablets or connectivity or power outlets. They're genuinely expecting that for the money
Mm.
they pay, they're getting a better experience. And so I think people need to be wary of that when they're looking at what they're planning to put into their hotels, particularly if you're looking at a renovation or a refurbishment or a retrofit or something, that
Mm.
people are looking for something more than what they've already got. Look, I think the other thing is, and I talk about this in some seminars, is this whole buzzword of digital transformation. I call it a buzzword. Actually, particularly in this part of the world, it's really organizational and behavior transformation. There's no point having a Ferrari and driving it around the streets of Bangkok. You just simply can't utilize it to the capacity that you've got. And there's some great tech tools, but you're limited by your surrounds. And certainly I've experienced that you've really got to address what changes you need in the organization and the changes you need with the behavior of your team members to be able to maximize the opportunity and the efficiency that you're going to get out of these new tech tools. The tech tools will grow over time. Their capacity will grow over time, but sometimes we're held back by people that are as not up to speed as the technology is.
That's a great point. And I loved your analogy about a Ferrari in the streets of Bangkok because you can't really let it
Yeah.
out. You're better off with a just a scooter. Wayne, where do you think the industry or what the industry might look like in 10 years from now? Will there be dramatic change or is it similar to what we've got?
No, look, I think what you're going to see is that, and I said it earlier, more of this curation. There's at the top end, particularly, people want these bespoke experiences. We're certainly seeing it that the things that they're looking for are very different to what they were 5 years ago.
Mm,
Subsequent to COVID, we started to see room service increase because the amount of time you want to spend close to people in restaurants is different. We're seeing an increase in the amount of occupancy in suites and higher room categories. People
mm,
want more room. They're spending more time in the room. They want genuine cultural experiences when they travel. They don't want this cookie cutter approach, not only in the hotel, but the experiences they get outside of the hotel. They're
mm,
looking for authenticity. They're all looking to get away from their busy lives. You've certainly embarked on things like wellness and created and built wellness centers, but not wellness centers in the pampering style, but really genuinely targeting things that people want. Doesn't matter whether it's iridology to help them stop smoking or whether it is they actually want some sort of aesthetic experience. But we see that that's going to evolve into that space. From a business travel perspective, yeah, people are trying to minimize their travel. If they were at 5-star, maybe they were traveling at a 4-star now. If they're going on 5-day sales trips, maybe they're only going to do 3 or 4. They
yeah,
found different ways to be able to connect with people that they need to do business with. That being said, people recovered relatively quickly in terms of wanting to have that face-to-face interaction,
yeah.
even from a business sense. So I think there's always going to be a need for that. Um, but I think it's the experience that's going to change over time, probably not be too dissimilar, but there'll be parts of what they need as part of their stay for whatever reason that will change.
It's great. Yeah, yeah. And what is your hope for our industry?
Wow, that's a deep question.
Well, I mean, it is a deep question, I suppose. I mean, is there a particular, thing that you would like to see change?
If there's one thing that stands out, and it's an emerging theme as well, is
Mm,
what everybody's doing in the sustainability space, what's happening in the environmental space.
yeah,
That's clearly going to evolve over time. The expectations of the hospitality business to ensure that they're affecting real impact on the
mm,
environment is going to be more and more noticed.
yeah,
We certainly have seen it. We were able to secure some sustainability linked bonds and loans in the last 12 months. And
mm,
there are clear deadlines and requirements for us to be meeting in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. And that's got to, even in our organization where sustainability is one of our pillars, we have to affect behavior change in a hotel that we
yeah,
don't take things for granted. Just simple things like food waste. And people talk about food waste a lot, but every time you go to a hotel, you still see it, and single use plastic and all of these things that they're not buzzwords anymore. They're actually, we want to see what you're doing, and you become socially accountable for all of those things. But it's actually making conscious choices. For the last 5 to 10 years, people have always said, "Oh, look, people will pay more money if you're only getting your sheets washed every 3 days." I think most people would say that's probably fairly doubtful. But these days, it's genuine. And so, what are you doing for decarbonisation? They're questions. We've had questions like, are you ensuring that your restaurants are not serving pork from pregnant pigs? And and there are markets like Europe that are very advanced in this thinking. So for us as a global organization, we're looking at those, almost those lowest common denominators of things that we know are going to be trends that we need to be conscious of. And I think that whole ESG space is genuinely going to form part of the social accountability of organizations moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you're right. As an industry, we've certainly got to play our part.
And that extends to even airlines. It's people
True.
traveling. People are going to get conscious about the amount of carbon footprint by you traveling long haul. Does that mean people are going to travel short haul more often instead of going long haul? Maybe. You're not penalized for doing that, but in the future, as there are more restrictions, that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but me being forward thinking as much as I can, you need to be prepared for those things. As much as I love traveling myself, you're going to be conscious about the decisions that you make in the future. And the industry needs to adapt to that.
Yes, yes. And I think we've gone from as you said, a number of years ago where we'd have a little tent card that says, please, leave your towels on the hook if you don't want us to wash them. And we all sort of knew that really was a cost-saving exercise more than contribution towards the environment. But I think we have changed, and we need to. There are some obviously, Australia as a country committed to the Paris Accord, and when we did, those timeframes seemed like a long way away, but they're not anymore. 2030
No,
is not that far at all. We'll be there before we know it.
yeah, and look, there are international entities like MSCI that are providing some real rigid guidelines in terms of what it is that they want companies to be doing, and the hotel, the hospitality industry is no different. Yeah, and some of these things require investment. If you're going to go full solar, yeah, what are you going to do? But in the hotel business, everybody's out during the day. It just so happens the peak time is when the sun goes down, as they're coming back in off the beach or they're coming back from meetings. All the lights go on, all the gas goes on as you power up the restaurants. It's how you address some of those things that we've got to be very, very conscious about.
That's a really good point. Wayne, as we get ready to wrap up, the last question I always like to ask is, what advice would you give to somebody who's either considering a career in hospitality or is just about to start their career in hospitality?
Look, Brendan, probably two or three things. Look, learn as much as you can. Certainly I did. I moved sideways a number of times, and I was in project development and shopping mall management, and I learned so many different things along the journey. For me, it made it interesting. So in that respect, you'll probably enjoy the journey because it is a lifestyle. It's not a job. And it certainly made it very interesting for me. I turned 60 years old last year, and I still feel like I've got plenty in me and things that I want to contribute because I enjoy the industry so much. I think the other thing, be patient. This is, working for us, working in nearly 60 different countries now. You've got to be very patient in the way that you operate. It certainly held me in good stead, and respectful. Be patient and respectful. And that old adage, you got two eyes, two ears, and one mouth for a reason, applies very much so in hospitality. And I've worked in big cities, but I've also worked in places like Vanuatu where non-verbal is the way in which you communicate. And that was a huge learning experience for me. So, be patient and respectful.
Okay. And that's when you say patient, obviously when you're dealing with people, but patient in your career growth as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And find the right opportunity, and don't be there's plenty of opportunities in this industry, but make sure it's the right opportunity. The last thing you want to have happen to you is that you're a job hopper. And I can see that more regularly now, that the job hoppers have less credibility in terms of building a solid career with a company with a foundation of excellence. It's much harder.
Yeah. That's great advice. Wayne, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Ah, Brendan, thanks very much. I really enjoyed it.